Good morning, friends from academia, policy makers, and friends from media and entertainment and the creative industries. Thank you for joining us here at the inaugural FICCI Frames-LEAP. LEAP, what does that stand for? Learn, educate, apply, and practice. It's the first initiative to be able to focus on education in the creative sectors. Making the informal formal is the key agenda of tomorrow, to be able to build tomorrow. And how can we talk about tomorrow without talking about sowing the early seeds of creativity? That's where we begin today. Today's inaugural session is focused on sowing the early seeds of creativity. We have with us a distinguished panel of speakers and moderators. We have with us Mr. Om Pathak, Chairman of the Delhi Public School Society, Ms. Nandita Das, renowned actor, director, former chairperson of the Children's Film Society of India, Dr. N. Srinivasan, founder and chairman of the Gear Foundation, Dr. Niyati Chitkara, vice president of the Chitkara schools, multiple across Chandigarh and Punjab, Ms. Geetika Timmins, founder director of the Indo-Outdoor School Goa, and our moderator, Dr. R.W. Alexander Jesudasan, Pro-Vice Chancellor of the Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science. With over 34 years of teaching and administration experience, he's been the principal and secretary of the Madras Christian College. He's also an Indian entomologist, credited with the discovery of more than 60 species of whiteflies in South India. But to start today, I'm going to invite our first keynote speaker, Ms. Sunita Sanghi, Senior Advisor, Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship. What is the use of all our education if not for skilling, development, employment, entrepreneurship, and being able to create job opportunities for tomorrow? Over to Ms. Sunita Sanghi.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Let me at the outset thank FICCI as also the Media and Entertainment Skill Council for inviting me to this exciting session. And I feel this session has been organized and this conference has been organized at a very opportune moment, especially when Government of India has announced a new education policy, which is also focusing on creating taking hold of the creativity of the young minds right at an early age by introducing a vocational education in an experimental mode from class 6 onwards. Now, we all know that when we were growing up, the only choice that, and we joined the service, the only occupations which were economically and socially valued were the government jobs. But with rapid rise in global output in the 90s and first decade of the millennium, which is powered by the new means of communication energy, I think new professions, computer engineering, medicine, management, and yes, media and entertainment has also come into focus. But the new age technology, including access of high-speed internet to masses, artificial intelligence, machine learnings, they have characterized the new digital age. The COVID-induced disruption has really accelerated this change by 5 to 10 years, and digital disruption and technologies are permeating all economic spheres and have led to transformation of business model, transaction processes, and even affected changes in our daily lives. Now, such a change is only visible in the education and the skilling space, wherein the rote and uniform learning processes were giving way to experiential and personalized learning. This is today manifested in the form of distributed classrooms, online AR, VR-based learning, and personalized experiences. Now, what has been an impact of media and entertainment sector? The non-traditional fields, including the arts, language, and creative industries, shall be disproportionate beneficiaries of this trend. This is because the social media, gaming, animation, music are now at the center of our digital identity instead of supplements to our domain profile. Now, this is driven by drastic change in a way media and entertainment is consumed. As FICCI has been pointing out in its Frames report, year after year that content is being consumed on the go over multiple platforms, especially the mobile platform, which is expanding at the fastest pace, authentic and quality content has emerged as the indisputable king in the media and entertainment sector, away from managing the network and the supply chain. As an outsider to the sector and as a policy maker, I believe that this quest for quality entertainment across genres is only the starting point. With trends of proliferation of OTT, personalized entertainment, demand for vernacular content, and changing lifestyles, the demand for quality content is expected to experience sustained rapid growth. This transformation presages huge manpower requirement in the sector at all levels of value chain, vis-a-vis the pre-production, production, post-production processes. Trained resources are also required to operate latest equipment and manage latest technologies. Now the question is, where does the government role fits into it? Now from a government perspective, and in particular from the perspective of the Ministry of Skill Development and Entrepreneurship, the mantra therefore is to scale up and enable this change so that more creative talent gets recognition and livelihood opportunities. Some of these measures, as I earlier said, have been proposed in the national education policy, including change in the curriculum. The NEP commits to introduce creativity and innovativeness and a sense of aesthetics and art in the curriculums of schools so that students and parents are able to identify creative talent among their children. There is also focus on creative faculty. The policy makes a provision of strong departments and programs in Indian languages, comparative literature, creative writing, arts, music, philosophy, across the country, and degrees including 4-year BA, dual degrees will be developed in these subjects. These departments and programs will in particular help to develop a large cadre of high quality language teachers, as well as teachers of art, music, philosophy, and writing. There is also mention in the policy about the pedagogy. The teaching of all languages will be now enhanced through innovative and experimental methods, including through gamification apps by weaving in the cultural aspects of the languages, such as films, theaters, storytelling, poetry, and music. Since a large proportion of the media and entertainment workforce is not formally trained, there is a huge scope of formal skilling adding to the productivity of the industry. Also, given the fact that a large number of our young kids, prior to this new education policy, what will be the impact of the new education policy, one has to say when it actually gets implemented. They were leaving the schools right at a very early age before completing the class 10th. As a result, they were entering the labor market, and I think they were entering the media and entertainment industry also, maybe in a blue-collar kind of a job, but they were there. Now, since a large proportion of them, as I said, are not formally trained, there is a scope for formal skilling, adding to the productivity of the industry. Now, vocational courses can be one pathway for making formal training a norm in the industry and attract students that are naturally talented for creative courses. Now, for actualizing this, the media and entertainment ecosystem has to strengthen the demand and supply aspects of the media and entertainment graduates. Now, the major employers, they have to really look at the productivity gains, which are accrued by hiring the skilled professionals compared to the other workers. Here, the Media and Entertainment Sector Skill Council, which has been incubated by the National Skill Development Corporation under the aegis of the Ministry of Skill Development, it can really pitch in through an empirical study to clearly quantify the gains for employers in hiring skilled versus the unskilled workers. Now, if you look from the supply perspective, there is an increasing focus on quality in training, assessment and certification, so that the skilled professionals can prove their worth and seek wage premiums. With the operationalization of the skill regulator, what we call the National Council for Vocational Education and Training, the focus on credibility of qualifications, assessments, certifications will really receive a fillip. The role of apprenticeship is very, very significant when it comes to the media and entertainment segment. It is very, very significant because the practical training and an understanding of how to apply conceptual knowledge to the work environment is highest in the media and entertainment sector. There's a scope for enhancement in the existing number of apprentices who are enrolled in the sector. Since I'm handling apprenticeship also in the Ministry of Skill Development, I've been interacting with the Media and Entertainment Sector Skill Council and have been focusing on and laying emphasis on taking on large number of apprentices, because it is one sector where unless and until you actually practice, you actually have a hands-on training, you cannot specialize, you cannot have a perfection. And this sector requires precision. The informal and small enterprises, they can really take advantage of the third-party aggregator system that we have developed for bringing on board the apprentices. Given the fact that there is 1.3 billion eyeballs, the size and employment of India's media and entertainment sector is very, very minuscule compared to the developed world. Now, this is set to change as per capita incomes and propensity to consume quality content rise. The sector really has a potential to raise total employment to 10 million people over the next decade. From the Ministry of Skill Development and Enterprises, we are also looking at this sector as a sector which can really take skills to the nook and corner of the country by giving complete media coverage. Because given that skills is not very aspirational, I think the creativity of the sector can really play a very, very major role. And it is with this sector that I think Ministry of Skill Development is also willing to partner with. We have been, after the Media and Entertainment Sector Skill Council, to facilitate taking this particular message to different segment of the society, that vocational education, skill education, be it in a creative sector, is very, very important if you're looking for the livelihood opportunities beyond the normal kind of a job rules. Because media and entertainment sector is progressing very well. The amount of changes that it is witnessing every day, it is not static, it is changing. When I joined the service 36 years ago, we only used to have DD News. But today, in 1984, but today we have multiple news channels, and the way our today's kids are exposed to the content, it is very, very necessary that media and entertainment plays a positive role. And given the fact that a new education policy is providing flexibility, route wherein a child can enter, leave, exit, and again come back, I think there is a huge scope for the media and entertainment sector to enter into the school curriculum and facilitate taking on the creative mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Sanghi. You shed light very clearly on the sector, making it a champion sector for the national education policy and the way forward. Moving forward, I'd like to join hands to welcome our keynote from Mr. Om Pathak, Chairman of the Delhi Public Schools Society. Mr. Pathak is an educationist beyond extraordinaire, and we're all looking forward to hearing his thoughts about what we can do and where do we go from here. Mr. Pathak, over to you.
Thank you. Good morning to all my co-panelists, and a very good morning to all of the participants who have logged in as a part of the audience. And I sincerely hope and wish that they benefit from this conference. I have a couple of bullet points to speak about, and I shall remain very focused on what the topic says, sowing early seeds of creativity. And so starting off from where the previous speaker left, the new education policy. Now, if anyone has any doubt that the new education policy will be a panacea for all that has ailed Indian K-12 segment, that's a school education, that is wrong. Even the 1986 and the 1992 revision of the education policy was not flawed in any manner, but what was deeply flawed was the implementation. So the detail went missing there. So that is something I think the new education policy will have to be extremely careful about. While I welcome every bit of the policy, every aspect of the policy that's been formulated, and I hope and wish that it succeeds and it delivers what it intends to. Now, coming to the whole business of creativity, this is not the first time that we're talking about it. I mean, the country has debated that for decades, as far as I remember, but then we haven't done anything on that. We've just been debating about it. How do we get it? The first point that we must all understand that worldwide, regardless of whether you're in the professional education, technical education, higher education, and particularly K-12 education, assessments drive learning. In all our school systems, I mean, the whole race, whether it is the ICSE or the central boards, that CBSE or the state boards, I mean, everyone is teaching and everyone is learning to the syllabus, referring to the last 10-year papers, looking at the important questions and preparing accordingly. Preparing for what? The clear difference, therefore, ladies and gentlemen, is about knowledge and performance. And what I like to say is the system has been oriented only towards performance, and it does not result into any enduring learning. So assessments have to change. Regardless of how great the policy is, unless we tweak our assessments, we will not be able to promote creativity. Now, what is creativity? I mean, creativity is not confined to education in creative arts. Creativity applies across any field of activity, any domain of life and living. So, how do we promote that? So, I was trying to figure out what does creativity mean? And in very simple words, creativity means that seeding of new ideas through exploration, research, and discovery. This is the simplest definition of creativity that I can put across. And it is not bound or confined by what age you are or by what profession you practice. It is all over. Now, how do you promote creativity? Now, the first thing that we need to do is that all this while we've been rather prescriptive in our approach. Do this and you will get marks. Don't do this, don't do that, do this, do that. If you pick up the videos of the CBSE toppers of the last 4-5 years, and every time a correspondent or an interviewer asks the topper, so what message do you have for your colleagues and your cohorts? And the topper would say, NCRT ghotlo bas. Only NCRT books and you'll be there. I mean, I thought it is pathetic. Where is the creativity? NCRT books could only be a good reference like any other book. But then knowledge doesn't end there. The knowledge lies far beyond the 2 cover pages of a textbook. So what are we doing about it? How are we unleashing creativity? How are we creating conditions wherein children are drawn towards creativity? So one of the things that we must do is, and the system must talk about, is Number one, all learning must be inquiry based. And the whole era of didactism is over. It's no longer the teacher being the sage on the stage and a blackboard and everything is, and all knowledge is dispensed. It is not going to work any longer. A lot of countries have moved on. A lot of international board systems have moved on. So therefore, inquiry is important. Guided inquiry is important. Let each child, each student, each learner discover. And I can tell you, the moment I discover something for myself, it will last me a lifetime. I don't have to revise it. I know it. I know how it works. So, inquiry-based learning is one thing. Second is student-led, not teacher-led. A lot of times we don't even care about what the students think of what they are learning or what they wish to learn. हमने सोच लिया और घोटा लगा के पिला दिया, हो गया. That is what we have to move away from. And we have to, most importantly, take away the fear of failure. For one simple reason, that there is in life no one correct answer. Answers and solutions are contextual, and for the same person, the same problem, the solution could be different in the morning and different in the afternoon or evening. So, in any case, the solution that he is found in the morning is not more wrong or more correct than the solution he will find in the afternoon. Do you not look back and sometimes wonder, कि अरे भाई वो गलती हो गई, कोई बात नहीं, अब सुधार लेंगे. So, life does not present one single correct answer. It offers multiple answers, and their correctness lies in their fruition as to how do they conclude. There are multiple paths to learning and not just one path that we practice. Hence, creativity is about freedom. Is about freedom to learn, freedom to fail. I mean, you hear of great stories of some of the great scientists who nobody thought anything of, and yet they rose to such great eminence and contributed so richly. So that is the creativity, whether it is art or it's science or it's math or it's languages or it's anything. Creativity is possible in just about everything. Creativity is even possible in this webinar that we are conducting. We can be very creative about this webinar. So the whole idea is, what new thought are you bringing to the table? And how do you back and support it with evidence? That is important. So, another thing that I like to share with you is that this is really not the first time that anyone is prescribing. We know the International Baccalaureate Organization, which is based in Geneva and today has about 5,000 schools across 168 countries. Now, they created an assessment program which then determined the kind and the quality of pedagogy it will have. And there, the kind of freedom that they have given, whether in class 1 or you're in class 12. Just for the sake of the audience, I must tell you that one of the most fantastic things that the system does is that there is a paper called Theory of Knowledge, wherein you are encouraged to challenge the existing paradigms and try and prove them wrong. You may not be able to prove them wrong, but the whole process of exploration, discovery, and the debate that you bring into the theory of knowledge paper is the one that leads to creativity. So, ladies and gentlemen, I think I would be brief. I would say a couple of things. One, our assessments will have to be majorly overhauled. Today, it is also happening again, going back to briefly to the IB. There, you may or may not get a diploma in class 11 and 12. That is a diploma for class 11 and 12. You may only get a certificate, but you still can go to an Ivy League college. So, therefore, it is a question of choices. It is a question of freedom, freedom from fear of failure. That is most important. And that assessments will have to be so structured, will have to be so designed that we focus more on the thinking process of the student rather than the final answers. So that means your marking schemes will have to be so modulated that you have some marks for the correct answer as expected, but more weightage for the process of thinking. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a huge challenge that we have. Seeding creativity early in life will actually last you a lifetime. So, going forward, all future schools will have to focus on that. And I must say that I've been part of the government, so I know how governments move. There's a policy, but if the boards don't change their assessments, we can 20 years hence still be where we are. And this is time that we stop blaming Macaulay for what was left behind. It is time that we reinvent our own education system in our own context. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Pathak. You have taught us and made us debate, discover, and I think today's session promises to be one wherein we will discover a new world and forget about paradigms. So with that, I'm going to hand you over to our moderator for our session on sowing seeds of creativity, Dr. R.W. Alexander Jesudasan, Pro Vice Chancellor of the Hindustan Institute of Technology and Science. Dr. Alex, you may introduce your panel formally and please move forward. Over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Sabas Joseph, for the words of welcome and introduction. And on behalf of the Hindustan Institute, I would like to greet each one of you. I would like to thank FICCI for having given me the opportunity to moderate this session, and also to the university for having allowed me to do so. Thanks to the two keynote speakers, Madam Sunita Sanghi and Shri Pathak, for very clearly and very distinctively being brought out the important points. I think Madam has emphasized, unless and otherwise there is a kind of a pandemic like this, which compels us to look for alternatives and alternative pedagogies. It forces us to think and to experiment innovation and creativity. Otherwise, we would be simply stuck down with what conventionally things happen. Thanks to Shri Pathak for having focused a lot on the assessment patterns that we have. It is still the old model of recollection and not really a way by which we are able to assess the intelligence. With these word of thanks and the noteworthy points from these two presentations, let me give my initial thoughts on this topic and move on to inviting our friends on the panel, Madam Nandita Das, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Niyati Chitkara, and Ms. Geetika. Now, this title, I think I have tried to break into three parts. Sowing early seeds of creativity. Part one is the seed. Part two is sowing, and part three is creativity. The seed or seeding can remain as a seed forever, and probably with having little amount of protein or nutrition in it. Unless and otherwise it is sowed, it doesn't allow things to be transformed and translated. And that is a place I think is a starting point of creativity. And this is what I think we are trying to do with our young minds. And when I say young minds, a very aged person can also be having a very, very young mind in the thought process. I think that is what was emphasized by Sri Pathak. So the point is that the seeds have to be sown and it has to undergo transformation, change for fresh thinking. And that is a starting point for creativity. Creativity is the stem for innovation. And innovation leads to inventions. But unfortunately, as we look at our systems, it is as to how I'm able to cover the syllabus from first page to the last page. Finishing portion has been the kind of an agenda of the teacher who comes in, by which I think we put to end the thought process that is there in the listener's mind. And again, as was emphasized, when we talk about creativity, is just not restricted to education. It could be in any field. And I think our system should provide an opportunity for exploration of that process of transformation. Disciplined thinking is also very important, as has been emphasized by Benjamin Bloom, a systematic approach that would lead to the fruition of the thought process that is taking place. My dear friends, I think we have with us in our panel very distinguished people who got reasonable knowledge and exposure on many, many facets of the kind of thinking process that take place in the schools and in the educative system. We have Madam Nandita Das, whom we know has acted in 40 feature films in 10 different languages. She holds a master's degree in social work, and she was conferred the Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters. Now, moving on, we have Dr. Srinivasan. When I read through the profile, I think it is not the kind of education that he has had that has put him into formation of a chairman of Gear Foundation, but it was an accident that changed his entire process of thinking. And it's what he is now is a product of that kind of an experience that he has faced in life. Thirdly, Dr. Niyati Chitkara. In fact, I had the opportunity to speak at Chitkara University, Chandigarh, some years back, and I'm very pleased to see her today, this morning. She's the principal of Chitkara International School and a quite voracious leader and a very accomplished person in the field of education. I invite her to serve on the panel. And last but not the least, Madam Geetika Timmins, the founder of Energy Keeper, a biomimicry-inspired startup focused on creating solutions and engaging with children and youngsters. My dear friends, I think we have a very brilliant set of panelists who are there with us. And maybe go in the order that I think I have listed, starting with Madam Nandita Das and Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Niyati Chitkara, Madam Geetika Timmins, and after your initial thoughts, we would have some probes or questions or clarifications that would probably, enlighten your entire presentation through sowing those seeds of thought in this panel discussion. Welcome to Madam Nandita Das.
Just start off with very few sort of opening remarks, because it'll be really nice to be able to have more time for a conversation and discussion that will follow. I actually grew up in a family of artists. I mean, especially my father, he's a painter. My mother is a writer. So the world of books and the world of art was something very natural for me. I mean, I think whatever environment the child grows up in is natural for the child. I mean, they know no better, right? So in a doctor's family, knowing about medicines and the terminology and that world would be familiar. So I got to know much later that this was a privilege, the fact that, people are talking about creativity and how important it is, because that's something that was part of my natural environment where I grew up, not just with my father, but his world, which means photographers and musicians and dancers and the kind of conversations as a child, one was privy to all of that. So it's not to become an artist. In fact, I had nothing to rebel against. So the only thing I wanted to, because as a child, you want to rebel against something, I said, I'm not going to paint. One of the big mistakes I did. But I learned music, I learned dance, I learned singing or whatever, not to become an artist, but to have that ear, just to have a more holistic life. And I think what Mr. Pathak said deeply sort of resonated with me. This whole thing of not having the fear of failure, to have an inquiring mind. For that, you need to have the freedom to question. And I'm most grateful to my parents and that childhood where no question was stupid. No question was to be sort of put aside, or even if an adult doesn't know the answer, this whole thing of being also vulnerable as grown-ups. Otherwise, we tend to always feel like we know the answer. And I mean, I have a 10-year-old child, and I know times have really changed. They are far more inquiring, they're far more thinking. I mean, I'm sure we were too, but they have much more space. So if I say something and he will immediately contradict me and say, but why can't it be this? Or, catch me if there is any contradiction in my statements. So just to allow them to question, allow ourselves to be vulnerable and say, you know what, I don't know the answer, but we're going to find it together. What again, drawing from what Mr. Pathak said about, where it's student led, it's child led, it's something you do together. I think it has been too top down for the longest time. And all of us here still, I think, are more privileged in the kind of schools we probably went to or the kind of work that we are doing now. When we talk of children, we are talking about a cross section of children, from rural school children to government school children to all those where there are 40 children stuffed in a classroom, where the teacher is already so stretched. Because creativity is not put at the center of education, it's seen as something on the side, it's not valued. It is seen as an elitist activity. It is seen as when you have everything else, when you have your math, science, all of that sorted, then you do creativity, then you indulge in it, then you paint, then you think of poetry, or then you sing. It's not put at the center of it. And I think it is we adults, and as a society, I don't think we have given creativity its due. We don't celebrate our artists. I mean, as a filmmaker, I remember, like, my last film was called Manto, which is based on the life and works of Sadat Hasan Manto, a writer of the 40s. And in an interview, a journalist said, do you know this is the first Hindi film about a writer? And I said, no, it can't be. We've got more than 100 years of cinema. This can't be the first Hindi film. And they said, yes, it is. And then I was reminded there was one more film on Mirza Ghalib, which was in fact written by Manto. And it's sad. I mean, in every language, we have writers and we have musicians and we have artists, but we don't celebrate them even in our cinema. We have more films about con men and underworld goons than we have about artists. And that's why today, as a society, we are not as empathetic, as compassionate, as caring. And there is a deep connection between creativity and all of this, because creativity is also an expression which kind of, you express yourself, but it also finds ways to challenge prejudices. It creates a certain sense of openness. It allows you to question things. So creativity and empathy, I think, also has a deep connection. And a society that doesn't care about creativity, doesn't really care about its artists, doesn't encourage art, also ends up being very straitjacketed. And therefore, I think if we can sow the seeds early on, I mean, I see that both as a parent, as my memories of a student. I studied in Sardar Patel, a really good school, fairly alternative within the sort of more mainstream structure, but still had a lot of creativity at the center of it. And also I had a little experience of 4 months in Rishi Valley as a teacher. This was when I took a break after between my graduation and postgrad, which I did in social work. I took 4 months off and I taught at Rishi Valley, and they were probably my best months. And J. Krishnamurti, a great educationist, philosopher, had creativity sort of so deeply entrenched in the way you study, in the way you learn, in the way you teach, that that experience has also kind of stayed with me. I would also say that thinking out of the box is the seed of that creativity, of that questioning. So it's not only about the arts, but it's about being able to think beyond what is being taught to you, beyond what is available to you, beyond what your adults and grown-ups are telling you. So to be able to do that, a child needs freedom. A child needs not to be dumbed down. So I think we're going to, I'm sure, talk about many of these things, but I'm going to stop here just so that we have more time for it. But I would love to also share some of my experiences of the current challenges we face as a parent and also in this online world, and where everything is so gadget oriented, where we are doing less and less things that are tactile. Because for a child to be able to touch, to be able to smell, to be able to feel, that also kind of stimulates that creativity. When we are in front of this machine, it kind of diminishes all of that. So that is also really a grave concern that maybe all of us could address, so that our listeners can also start thinking about, I'm sure they all are grappling as we all are, to think of solutions that we can not just talk about the problem, but think of solutions also that maybe we can share with each other. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Nandita Das, for those very quick moments of beautiful reflections based on your own self and what is happening around. May I now invite Dr. Srinivasan to give his insights on the topic, after which we will have 2 more presentations and then discussions.
Namaste to all of you. Thanks for this wonderful topic and opportunity created by FICCI Frames. Let me come to the point straight away. We have very less time. See, let's see creativity. When does it start in a child? It starts at age 0. Brain has some functions in the first few weeks. When the brain senses something, from that time it can sense what is being creative, what is being peaceful, what is being disturbed. Okay. Now, once a child is born, we need to look at various aspects to foster creativity. And we depend on the schools and parents in this regard. So let me start with the 2 of my definitions for this context. One is, what is creativity? Creativity is that we have left in children when they finish school. And what is school? School is a system to destroy the creativity of the children step by step. See, I've been a teacher for the last 45 years, so I do understand what I say. Creativity has different aspects to be an input at different stages. Let's say how the brain develops over the years. First 6 months, the brain doesn't respond to anything except maintaining its own bodily system and connecting the neurons. First 6 months. Next 2.5 years, the child wants experience through the senses. The next 5 years, the child wants experience. And then the next set, the child wants to experiment. The experimentation starts somewhere from 8 to 12, 13. It doesn't stop there. Now let's see the stages, what we need to do as parents, as schools, and as public in general. See, God gives enough brain cells and creativity in the child. If we can avoid or eschew destruction of creativity, I think we would have done a fantastic job. We don't need to worry about anything else. I'll tell you what it means to be destructive or restricting. Now, the child comes with tremendous amount of curiosity. We are not able to meet the demand, so we put restrictions. The child, there are 2 aspects of creativity. One is the structure for the child to experience, and second, the experience itself. If we look at teaching as teaching, then it is not against creativity. We should look at teachers being only facilitators. If you are facilitating, the child is the protagonist, not the teacher. What does the child do? Up to the age of 6 or 8, some say 6, some say 8, the child is very interested in exploring. It is very important at a very early stage. As it goes up, it may change a bit, but exploration is the seed for creativity. If this is not facilitated, the brain will become dull. See, every day, every person gets about 70,000 of thoughts. If the child can be helped to connect these thoughts, the child will become a different thinker. When I say thoughts, the child learns and understands many things. It has many concepts without a word for it. The words come later on. That is what you will understand if you do Montessori method. So when the child has a concept, if the child has the word for it very early, creativity has different tentacles. If the word takes time, then the creativity development gets slowed down. Here comes the importance of language. The most important aspect of brain development or creativity is language. And researchers also say there's a huge difference between the brains of children who grow with only one language and who grow with more than one language. The child who operates in more than one language has larger areas of brain functioning at a higher level. So communication, as you say, or the language development becomes very important. And for the language development, one of the kind of important aspects is the number of words, the number of content words the child hears in a day. That is supposed to be around 22,000 a day. Then the language builds to its fullest capacity. So we have to keep that in mind. We have to create opportunities for the child to explore and construct knowledge by himself or herself. Then comes a lot of questions, a lot of connections the child makes between concepts, and the child also develops a lot of mental skills without we teaching. When we come to the next stage, we need to create opportunities for experimentation with the thoughts and material. This experimentation is not experiments you do in science lab where you give an experiment, you are expecting the data to be what you prescribe. Then how is it experiment? Experiment should produce data or statistics or results which is not predicted. If you can have real experiments promoted in the child's mind and practice, then the child will become experimental in thinking. See, we are talking of creativity, which is the topmost level of thinking, which was out of Bloom's taxonomy when he designed that. He ended up with only evaluation. He did not give creativity any space in his taxonomy. Of late, we have added creativity. How do we achieve that? For that, it is essential you operate at knowledge level, comprehension level, application level, analysis level, synthesis level. Then only you can look at creativity. So all these things have to be incorporated in education till the age of 11 or 12. Throughout this, we have introduced subjects with an intention. Now we have lost the intention. We are doing only the subject part of it or the content part of it. Like you have mathematics. It is supposed to stimulate certain parts of brain and thinking. It should promote abstract thinking. We are promoting mugging up or practicing 100 times. Science. Science is supposed to promote experimentation, not only to look at facts. History. History is supposed to promote investigation, not dates and names. Geography is supposed to promote imagination. Languages are supposed to promote imagination and communication. If we have forgotten this, we are taking, like one Pathak said, what only exam tests. So if we want creativity to flourish, we need to look at our whole set of education, which should depend on the child's style of thinking. Not every child will operate in the same way. You have to bring in Gardner's multiple intelligences. You have to look at setting up opportunities for the child to lead his or her own education. We need to only facilitate. What the child learns today will determine what the child wants to learn today and can learn today. If we can follow this up, I think the child will be in a set of thinking that will keep promoting creativity in the child. Instead of that, we can't keep directing. I think I would like to stop there. If there's any question, we'll address.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Srinivasan, for those very wonderful exposition that you have made. Because of want of time, we may have to quickly pass on to the next presenter, and we have two more presenters who would give their thoughts. And may I request you to kindly stick on to time of about 4 to 5 minutes, because we are asked to wind up on time. May I now invite Dr. Niyati Chitkara to give her thoughts.
So good morning, everyone. First of all, thanks to FICCI Frame for such a wonderful opportunity. I'd like to begin my discussion with a question. And this is something which is school education, with the school education perspective. And the question is that how many schools in our country, they function, in cohesion with universities and industries? Very few. How many of the schools in our country, they work with the perspective of employability? How many of our schools in the country, they work with the perspective of instilling creativity, so that, and which is measurable, which is definitely measurable. So my presentation basically starts with the basis of a document, a white paper, which was presented by the World in the World Economic Forum, that talked about how innovation and creativity is extremely important, and problem solving and analytical thinking and critical thinking, all these are part and parcel of the the entire system of creativity. Now, how my journey started into it was, this was 15 years back, when me and my team, we were just fresh graduates, pass outs, and we had no idea how schools were run. So we started studying all the schools around, and we started thinking that, how best can we create a different kind of a school which caters to the future generations. And that's where, and we already had 2 universities by our side. So at that time, everybody was talking about K to 12 curriculum. And instead of studying K to 12 curriculum, we went the other way around. We started with a very unique model of education, where our curriculum wasn't K to 12, it was university to K. Since our universities were working very closely with the industry, so that's where the element of industry also got embedded into our school system. And the more the school education works in cohesion with higher education and industry, more creative the schools become. So that's where the perspective of creativity entered into our school. Also, how creative are our schools? This is one question we need to ask, because do we have creative learning spaces in our school? How do we excite a learner, once who takes admission in our school, and his eyes are up, wants to see how creative the teachers are, how creative the infrastructure is. So the first thing that we started with creating fantastic learning spaces. We created the underwater world, we created jungle safari, we created 3D classrooms, we created a hybrid kind of a infrastructure format. We created different kind of playstations and study stations across. We created learning studios, we created hallways and walkways. So while walking through the corridors, while entering the classrooms, there used to be a scope of discussion on imagination. So rather than telling a student to write an essay on imagination or on a particular topic, why is it that we need to ask a child to, or per se, tell a child to kind of, come up with a discussion on a particular topic? Why is it that, the child gets some kind of initial clues from the environment around, and eventually the child kind of comes up with a topic and discusses it further? So that's how imagination starts. Also different kind of furniture which is color embedded, so that there's a lot of scope for pair work and group discussions into the classroom. Also, coming up with expression boards, which we call in our terminology as selfie stations, because these selfie stations ensure the expression of the student in any form. It needn't be, just write up or just a painting, but it could be any verbal, non-verbal, any kind of expression, that the child feels comfortable in. Also, it is very important to understand that, you cannot have a simple lecture-based or one mode of, presentation when it comes to teaching in a creative scenario. And how creative are our school teachers? That's a question. And how creatively B.Ed colleges, they train teachers to be creative. Do we have the format of assessment? Do we allow the students to and acknowledge their creativity? Do we allow them to come up with different kind of answers, different kind of perspectives? So that is where, the model came up with creating a breed of new alpha teachers, catering to Generation Z and Generation Alpha learners. Now, these are the generation of students who are born after 2003 and 2010. and they are much more creative than our teachers. So that's where the flaw is, and that's where the gap is. Also, when it comes to pedagogy, there is no one method, and there's no one rule of thumb that works for all. So we have to ensure that, the methodology is hybrid, and it's a good blend of co-curricular and curricular, scholastic and co-scholastic areas of learning. Research should be embedded in kindergarten. So while we were moving back from university education to school education, we found that science is missing in kindergarten. We found that, ultimately a child goes to a school, colors something and listens to stories, and maybe, do some letters or numerals and comes back. But there is no scope of any kind of, scientific inquiry. There is no scope of trying to understand whether the child will be a musician in future, and this gets decided in first 6 years of learning. So that's where first 6 years are extremely, extremely crucial when it comes to instilling and sowing the early seeds of creativity. Also, someone talked about the assessment framework, and I think Mr. Om Pathak very well, mentioned that, it starts from the assessments. Yes, it does. And I think there are different extremely innovative methods of assessment when it comes to kind of, trying to understand creativity in the learner and trying to gauge whether a learner is a creative learner or not. And definitely, one method that we use in our school, because it's a mobile app school, so everybody's, duly connected online, and it's traffic lights. So traffic lights would mean that, if a student shows some kind of, interesting evidence of learning, there'll be a red light, and then there'll be a green light, and then some student who's still trying to master the concept will be a yellow light. So different kind of formats and different kind of apps can be used, as for the assessment platform to make it extremely interesting and extremely engaging for the learners. Also, there are different kinds of fantastic modules, frameworks that can be created, where in our school we run a format where a 5th standard child teaches a 4th standard. The 5th standard child teaches the 4th standard child. And, when you teach, you learn the best. So different kind, and Bloom's taxonomy talks about that, analysis, interpretation, and creativity, they're the highest level of the pyramid. So that is where it is important. And how about the idea of children coloring their own report cards? How about children coming up with their own assessment framework? How about children coming up with their own concepts and own theories, as was mentioned by one of the speakers? So that's where, the creativity can be duly embedded into the system. Also, I would like to talk about the future of creative students. It is very important to, first of all, identify. Yes.
We need to just
sure.
Just in a minute, if you can.
Sure. So we would, it's very important, first of all, to identify who the creative learners are in our system. And once that identification is done, it's very, very important to monitor and track the progress of these creative students. How well are they doing? How well are they progressing? And post that, it's very important that the hand-holding of these students is duly ensured in safe hands. And when it comes to hand-holding, that is where I just talked about this unique model, where school education kind of safely puts the child into a higher education space where his creativity is taken into consideration, and ultimately his creativity is kind of acknowledged. So that is where, there are questions when people say that, board exams are there, and why is it that, we don't have any scope for creativity, but no board in our country stops us to innovate. So with that, I would like to close. Yes.
Yeah, because the other person's freedom has to begin now.
Sure.
May I request Madam Geetika Timmins to...
Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be part of such an esteemed panel. And I think everyone here has already said so much that I'd just like to add a few more words to it. I think as far as we're concerned, and my school is still a new school, it's something that's under development and it's going to be opened in the next 2 years. We at the indoor-outdoor school completely agree with everything that everyone has said here, whether it comes to assessment, whether it comes to forms of learning. I love listening to what Niyati just spoke about as well. I think there's just so much new stuff going on there. The essential thing, I think, for my journey really was as a parent. I came to this as a parent. I've had a background in media and entertainment, but it was when my own children were born that I started really looking at the various education systems that existed out there. What I found as a parent really was that it seemed to be at two ends of a pendulum. You either had this very traditional focused system or you had this very alternative heart-based system. And what I would have preferred to see was something that came through in a point of balance, where we could bring both the heart and the mind together. And how could you really develop it? probably not having an academic background in terms of a specific education, what really what we really looked at was saying, let's start really afresh. Let's not have any assumptions. Let's go down to the basics. And we asked ourselves the first question of what is it that we're really looking for a child? And it's clearly success at some point, as to growing up and being successful. And for a large degree, success has always been monetary or economic. But today we understand that it's not just that. It's mental success. It's a state of well-being, whether that be mental, emotional, spiritual, social. And so it's an all-rounded personality, an all-rounded experience, more or less like a holistic development. And there were so many different aspects, whether the concept of play, whether the concept of like Nandita spoke about, in terms of the need for that tactile and that sensorial experience being so crucial to the growing years of the child. And how do you actually create this hybrid model of technology and the tactile experience coming together? And these are the different aspects we put together. And for us, we believe that it is within the world of nature that you find a lot of those answers. And so it is in that space that we've developed our model. And the name indoor outdoor really refers to the concept of the learning happening as much outdoors as it does indoors. And and then of course the question is, how do you do that? So the one key thing that we found was, growing up, especially when I was growing up, it was all about what you knew, and that became the baseline. Today already that's changed into what you can do with what you know. So it's all about application, it's all about experiential learning, it's all about applying that. But I think moving forward, and possibly very, very soon, what it is already transforming into is who you are. And that is the essential aspect of what we need to focus on in the education space. So for us, we've kept the whole philosophy fairly simple. It's in the world of nature. It's how do you interact with that. The how is a curriculum that we've established, which is an international board. But then the application of it, the constant interaction with it, is something that will keep changing and developing as per the child. So I won't take too much time, because I think everyone's already said so much. But that was just our sense of offering to the space. And, we're very excited about it, and hope to have the chance to continue with these kind of panels and learning more.
Thank you very much, Madam Geetika, for your kind understanding of the time restriction. I think you've done a fabulous job in the few minutes that was there at your disposal. Well, we have a couple of minutes before we could wind up this show. I have a small question, or no, not a question, but then requesting, Madam Nandita Das to elicit on the area. What is the incident in your life that has really enabled you to, because you grew up in a kind of a setup that is probably out of the box, if I were to say. Could you just probably give one or two instances of, how exactly your growing environment has given room for creativity? Maybe one or two instances.
Yeah, so I think, like I said, just, growing up in that environment where I would go to Sardar Gurcharan Singh. He was the father of studio potter, and his pottery wheel would be under the neem tree. And we were like just small. And the fact that he would do this pottery, and every clay that was, would fall off, he would pick it up very slowly. He said, we shouldn't waste it because it's clay, it will go back into clay. Things that I think children are such sponges that they absorb every little bit. So many occasions like this. I remember when I was doing my board exam and I was terrible with maths, and my father would say, you look so tense, go and water the plants. And I would say, are you crazy? I mean, all parents are telling their children to study and you want me to go and water the plants? He said, yeah, talk to them. And I would very grudgingly go with a pipe and trying to water the plants angrily, and slowly my whole energy would shift. So I think what Geetika also said about nature, I mean, I'm now in outside Bombay, and there's a river flowing, and there is greenery around, and children are different, and especially urban kids who don't even who think walking bare feet outside is dirty. That earth is not dirty, earth is primal, it's natural, it's the most beautiful thing. So it almost takes 2 days for them to sort of get into nature. And also there's so much creativity naturally in nature that the closer we are to nature, we don't have to teach them all of this. So like Mr. Pathak said, it's not about the words, it's not, they have those concepts in their heads. So yeah, I mean, I feel now so privileged. We think of privilege as money and economy because it's all driven by that. But privilege to be able to have these thoughts, these experiences, is in itself, I think, a great privilege. So what, as parents, as educators, we can do is to just throw our children to experience different things. They will come up with their own learnings.
Thank you very much. I think that has been the stress on experiential learning. I think that is what I think is being stressed a lot. I think we have almost come to the close of the bell, and I think each one of you had really made a fabulous presentation. I think it itself has been very creative. It has not been taken from some source, but it is based on the experience. As an educationist, as a part of the education system, I think each of us have spent decades on that. I think what came out from your heart is exactly what you have found out, what you've experienced, and what is lacking and what needs to be done. I think your experiences and your insights into the topic would definitely be a beautiful platform for people to pick up leads and to make our education system that would give ample opportunities for creativity. And by that, I think Indian students will be able to contribute much to inventions, discoveries, and thus enjoy life. I think eventually, I think each of us need to enjoy life. I think in the true sense, I think to be with the nature and to live with the nature. I think with these words, I think I would like to close this session. I would like to thank Vicky for this opportunity. I'd like to especially thank each one of the panelists who are here, who made a very splendid job. And thanks, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alexander, Dr. Srinivasan, Dr. Om Pathak, Nandita Das, Geetika, and Dr. Niyati. It was a fabulous, discussion since morning. And on a first call, all of you confirmed to come. It is just amazing. In fact, we have a great opportunity with the NEP. And Dr. Srinivasan and me have worked intensely with several recommendations. Even had several, talks with Dr. Om Pathak, Geetika, Niyati also. Nandita, we interacted when you were a chairman of Children Film Society several times.
Yes, I remember.
But we want to take this agenda in a very constructive manner. We want to really do a group at FICCI for, the early education interventions, whether we do that intervention with parents as primary source for interaction with kids, or with the schools, and with the schools as well. So we want to form a group for the creativity, design thinking, performing arts, including sports, because where you start early, that's where we want to create this. And I am creating a art village of 2,500 acres in Lonavala, and I wrote this concept.
Wow.
Dr. Om Pathak, Geetika, and Dr. Srinivasan know about this concept. And that's where we want to make sure that we make a very unique space for kids to, get into this.
Please make it quickly. Our children are growing up too fast.
I know.
So selfishly speaking, I'm desperately looking for a school where all our thoughts can actually happen. Geetika, that's to you as well.
Yes.
Please hurry up. I'll roll in, I'll sign up for it.
And Dr. Alexander, it was really nice you to moderate this session. And it's a great start. Yesterday's, I'm sending you all the links for yesterday's, sessions that we had. And we have a fabulous lineup even today, because we want to really make use of it. And, I not look at pre-COVID and post-COVID. I would say pre-NEP and post-NEP is something that we need to look at and make it more positive for all of us.
One request to make.
Yeah. Yeah, doctor.
Finish.
Yeah, doctor.
My request is that we do have such debates, and they are
Exactly.
purposeful, and a lot of eminent people come in and share their thoughts. But we must take it to its logical conclusion.
Yes.
Now, we
Couldn't
have a
agree more.
But as I said earlier in my initial opening remarks, that even the 1986 policy was not terribly flawed,
No.
nor was the 92 revision. But the fact is that these policies never got implemented. Now, the real challenge is that this new education policy must actually roll out on the ground, number one. FICCI, therefore, since you are the consumer of talent that schools produce, because you are the federation of industry and all kinds of industries are represented here. So since you are the final consumer of human resource and human talent, so you have a responsibility to raise your voice. And as I said, there's only one thing that I want done in the new education policy, and that is greater autonomy to schools. You know, Mr. Modi has been speaking about less government, more governance. We truly want it to happen on the ground. And secondly, assessments must change. Assessments must change. So if FICCI can build a very powerful sort of a opinion group
Yes.
and influence the government, it will be a great help. Then this meeting will be extremely meaningful.
No, that's exactly what we want to do, OMG. In fact, I have been going to several universities to start creative programs for the last 25 years. I succeeded with 40, 50 universities, but we want to do a school intervention. And I think that's where we would form a group and take it systematically. As we have been working very closely with many school groups, like Niyati ji and Dr. Srinivasan, we have traveled all over India. But we would definitely form a group within this month and take the agenda forward. And I would request all of you to become a part of that group so that we can drive it in the right way.
Ashish, one line from my side.
Yes, sir.
Ashish, the policy is about education.
Yes, sir.
I don't find anything about learning.
Yeah.
And that's left to all of us to do now.
True. A lot of things are kept open for us to actually add in. So the policy is more liberal. And I think how much industry and, academia takes it along is going to be the, fruit bearer of this policy. So I think we need to actively work together to make things happen.
True.
Yeah. A big thank you to all of you. And we have a sports session after this. Thanks so much.
Thanks so
Thank
much.
you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.